Greetings, my scattered sisters and brothers in the Lord. Today we drop back in one more time on Jesus and the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well. And you'll recall that Jesus was tired from the journey. He sat down by the well. The disciples went on into town to get some food and to bring back to Jesus, and then they would be on their way north to Galilee, heading home. And you remember the conversation that the woman shows up in the middle of the day when no one is there and is surprised to find Jesus there. And Jesus begins to talk with her, asking her for a drink of water. And she's shocked that Jesus, a Jewish man, would be talking to her, a Samaritan woman. And Jesus then lets her know that he has water that he could offer her, living water, and that if she knew who he was, she would be asking for this living water. Jesus also told the woman to go get her husband, and she didn't have a husband. Jesus revealed to her that he knew her quite well, that she had had 5 husbands and was living with a man who was not her husband. She recognizes that Jesus is a prophet. The conversation goes on. Eventually, Jesus reveals to her that he is the Messiah that she has been waiting for. It's at this point that the disciples return. They come back bringing food, and they're shocked that Jesus is talking to this woman. And once the disciples arrive, the woman quickly exits. She heads back to the village. She leaves her water jug there at the well, and she goes back to the village and begins to tell everyone about Jesus. Could it be that this guy that I met is the Messiah? He told me everything about myself. And so while she's in the village witnessing to everybody, and it is quite a remarkable transformation, she goes to the well in the middle of the day so that no one would see her, and yet she leaves her water jug there and she returns to the village. And instead of trying to live without anybody seeing her, she's actually talking to everybody and letting them know about Jesus. Well, while she's doing that, the disciples are questioning Jesus. We brought some food, and Jesus tells them that I have food that you don't know about. And they're puzzled. They're wondering, did somebody come out here with food and feed us back here? Where did Jesus get this food from? And Jesus tells them that my food is to do the will of the one who sent me. Pretty interesting when you think about that. That food is obedience, that obedience is food. And the whole purpose we need food is for energy, to sustain us so that we can keep living. We have the energy, the health to keep on going. And so Jesus is saying something really profound here about obedience. My food is to do the will of the one who sent me and to finish the work. That when we obey what God calls us to do, that actually becomes energizing for us. Obedience brings about new energy, restored energy. And I'm not sure we always think about obedience that way. That sometimes we have a tendency to think about obedience as draining. And yet here's Jesus being obedient. And what Jesus is saying is that it's food for him. And so I think if we were more obedient, doing the things that we know that God has called us to do, what we would discover is that that actually re energizes us for more obedience and for greater faithfulness. So Jesus begins to then talk to them about the harvest and how the harvest is ripe, it's ready. And again, he's kind of speaking metaphorically about the work of witnessing, and that others have planted and now it's a time to reap. Um, and so the disciples are getting this lesson, and while they're getting the lesson, the Samaritan woman is actually doing it. And she is telling her townspeople, she sees them as a harvest, so to speak. She's telling them about what Jesus has meant to her. And so they come out and they come to hear Jesus for themselves. And at the close of the story, we get this line where a lot of the Samaritans are placing their faith in Jesus. And their testimony is that now we believe for ourselves, not on the basis of simply the woman's testimony, but we've met Jesus, we've heard Jesus. Uh, we believe on the basis of what Jesus has spoken to us, not just on the basis of the woman's testimony about Jesus. Again, she's doing the work of what Jesus was talking to the disciples about, and conversions were taking place. People were coming to Jesus, and people were receiving Jesus. And again, the woman may have given the first word to them, but she brings them to Jesus knowing that just as Jesus spoke to her, Jesus would speak to them. And when they hear Jesus, they place their faith in him. So wherever you are scattered today, just a couple things. Your food is obedience. That as you obey, you will discover new energy, fresh energy for following Jesus and for greater faithfulness. And second, that as you imitate the Samaritan woman in terms of telling people about Jesus and what he means to you, and you work to bring them to Jesus, you'll discover that there's a point in there where they start to believe not on the basis of your testimony, but because Jesus begins to speak to them just like he spoke to you. God bless. Have a great day.